Thwarted and agonized in his efforts in 1951 to transfer his political ambition to the Western region, he read the writing on the wall that Yoruba land could not be his constituency, that his power base was Igbo land in the Eastern region, where he could reap the benefit of charity beginning at home. In a meteor-like fashion, he descended on the Eastern region, easily dislodged the non-Igbo leadership of the regional government, and rapidly succeeded in installing himself as the undisputed head of the region. This is a lesson for Yoruba people, what I'm about to read right now. Thus, in the 50s, whilst Awolowo was being a quixotic idealist, injuring the most precious feelings of the Fulani Hausa leadership, Azikiwe was far more restrained and anxious to cooperate with the Fulani Hausa leadership. There was no question of him being petulantly arrogant like his Yoruba rival, who reportedly boasted once that he would never serve under a northerner. It is true that Awo, in these 1959 elections, did not care for anything about what will please the northern establishment. Awo didn't care. We talked about it earlier. Use helicopter, use choppers, had the plane in the air, writing stuff in the skies. They complained that the privacy of their wives were being invaded. The Bashiga. Awo sent his people to penetrate the northern region. By the way, when I said his people, I'm not talking about Yoruba people. They were northerners. They were northerners. Some of them from the Middle Belt, some of them from their house. Some of them were even Hausa themselves, who wanted the liberty or the independence of their own people, right? But they were dealt with by the northern establishment. Awo was being idealistic. And I've said it before, I think as Yoruba people, it's a lesson, right? It's a lesson. And like I said last week, when you read Awo's first book, Papa wrote in Path to Nigerian Freedom, published in 1947, he talked about the fact that, you couldn't govern Nigeria as one entity. And then he said, as long as people were made to feel that they were Nigerian first, they will feel the need to poke nose in the affairs of other regions. And whilst I want greatness for all parts of Nigeria, if a group wants something different, if you want to change it, you may have to work based on the culture of that place, even though you don't like it. And that was something that Papa didn't care for. And let me say something before we go on. If Papa had not acted the way he did, then he would not be Awo. In order to be Awo, he did what he was supposed to do, which was not work with the northern establishment. Come on. Or let me put it this way. He did what he was supposed to do, which was to look for a way to get the average Hausa person to, quote unquote, gain freedom. If Awo did not think of the plight of the Hausa, then it would not be Awo. It would just be any other politician who wanted power. And when we get to Awolowo versus Akintola, I'm going to get into some of these things. That was one of the major differences between Awo and Akintola. Awo didn't want power for power's sake. Awo was thinking about the people in the north, not to work with the establishment in order to. Akintola was like, and Akintola was being realistic. So I'm not saying Akintola was wrong. He was like, listen, if we're going to play this game, let's work with the north so that we can also get some of these largesse, just like the NCNC got between 59, from 59 until around 61, 62. When Akintola said, let's change this thing. And they didn't change it in time. NCNC got that thing until 64. In those 5 years, Nigeria was not tribalistic. Igbos were at the top of everything. Not because they had anything better, but because they used nepotism to the fullest, as reported by many books which we've read here. But the point I'm trying to make is that Awolowo having this itara, this passion for the people of the north makes sense to me. And I think everybody must have that passion. However, we cannot repeat his method. Because tí ẹṣin tó wà wájú tó bá ṣubú ó fi kọ́ àwa tí ẹni tó lọ wájú bá ṣubú ó fi kọ́ àwọn tó ń bọ̀ lẹ́yìn ó fi kọ́ ọlọ́gbọ́n ni. If we repeat it, that means that we have learned nothing. And that's why I tell people, this not now where we're shouting. There's a way around it. And the people that want to really do something, they're the ones who work with the establishment in the north. You like it though, you don't like it though, nobody cares. That's their own culture. And like I said, since I don't want anybody to come into Yoruba land with their weird culture, by the way, Yoruba culture is great. Some people have crazy culture, they still want to impose it on you. I don't want it. Therefore, I don't want it there either. We don't have to take our own there either. So that's the lesson from Awo. So when he says Awo was being a quixotic idealist, as a Yoruba person who loves Awo, you may say, no, it's a lie. It's true. It's true. Awo was being an idealist. Zik did not take that route. Zik did not go in the face of the northern establishment. However, contrary to what this writer wrote, that was not how Zik became the head or the governor general. That's not how. What he is saying here is that because he was a tactician and he was a strategist, he was able to work with the north. That's not what happened. He was literally forced to work with the north. And that's why I said, history generally is important to read more than one book. If you read this one, you might take that narrative, but there's another narrative. I'm going to read something to you from this book called A Fatherless People by Didogun. So how did Zik get power with the north? So again, I'm trying to correct a notion from this book. This book is saying that there was no question of Zik being petulantly arrogant like his Yoruba rival, who reportedly boasted. By the way, yes, Awo said he couldn't work under the north, and I understand it. So again, there's something about Awo. I apologize when I talk about him. I want to explain something. There's something about him that once you begin to study him, you will understand. It was, how what gives you advantage could also be a disadvantage. That's it. Was very principled. It was very disciplined. Read his description, how this man described him. Bolage. I read it here before. The book is called People, Politics and Politicians in Nigeria. It was published by Bolage. He described Awo. And I think he was right. Because the way he even writes his book, you can tell. Very methodical, very disciplined. It's a plus, but it could also be a minus, And that's why we learn from, his mistakes. But it was very principled. But let me read this first. So how did Zik get to work with the North? Very quickly, again, from A Fatherless People by Didogun. It says, party funding is always an issue with any electoral system. The Foster Sutton report published on 16th January 1957 confirmed what the colonial government already knew, which was that Azikiwe had been using customer deposits of his African Continental Bank to prop up the failing enterprises through which he had been funding the NCNC's activities. What does that mean? We'll come back to this book. I want to show you something. We'll come back to this one. I want to show you something from the House of Lords. So there was a sitting in 1956. What happened? What led to the Foster Sutton Tribunal? So this is from the Answered, House of Lords, 24th July 1956. Let me read what Lord Lloyd said. My lords, yesterday, in response to a question by the noble Lord Ogmore, I promised him that I would make a statement this afternoon. With your lordship's permission, I should like to make that statement, which is similar to one being made by my right honorable friend in another place at this moment. The statement is as follows. Please pay attention. A dispute has arisen in the eastern region of Nigeria about the relationship between the Premier, Dr. Azikiwe, and the African Continental Bank Limited. This bank was founded by Dr. Azikiwe. On assuming office, the Premier informed the governor that he had resigned his directorship of the bank. He and his enterprises with which he has been associated are still shown as large shareholders in it. My right honourable friend has been informed that during 1955, £877,000 of public money was invested in the bank and other large sums deposited with it out of funds made available from marketing board reserves to the finance corporation which the Eastern Region government had established. My right honourable friend has also been informed that following this investment, the bank was a party to certain documents contemplating that the Premier should be life chairman of the bank and purporting to give him the right to nominate certain other directors. What's all this? I mean, but I have to, because of time. By the way, we've done this before. We have a video on YouTube. Go to Pursue Your Risk, look out for Azikiwe and £877,000, something like that. Just if you use that as your search, as your keywords, you will find it. What did he say? What is he trying to tell us here? See, in 1955, by the way, before 55, Zik had established his own bank, African Continental Bank. And then Zik became Premier. Of course, in order to avoid conflict of interest, he was supposed to resign his directorship of the bank. And he claimed to have resigned the directorship of the bank. However, something else happened. Let's now go back to the book by Awolowo. In the East, the Foster Sutton Tribunal into Zik's African Continental Bank, ACB, found that it was insolvent. The principal use made of the public deposits in the ACB was to finance Zik's various business ventures. I'll explain. In 1955, the Eastern Region Finance Corporation invested large sums of money in the ACB, money which had come from the Eastern Region Marketing Board. In turn, Zik financed his party, the NCNC. In 1955, the ACB and Zik's businesses were virtually bankrupt. In 1959, the Development Board took over the ACB. What is he saying here? You see, Zik was the Premier of the region. But Zik was also the owner of a bank. Now, back in the day, the regions had corporations, businesses. You know, back in the day, there wasn't anything called federal allocation. You had to make your own money. So whether it was cotton or groundnut or cocoa or palm oil, whatever it is, or rubber, you've got to do something. So people, you know, you had taxes, and then you had exports. But for the marketing board, basically it's exports. So let's say, for instance, by the way, I've explained this before. Please, if you were here when I explained what happens with marketing board, please say yes. If not, please say no. I have a few minutes, so please help me. Just let me know. I want to make sure that we understand this, so we're not just talking. So if you were here when we explained it, please say yes. If you were not here, please say no. Okay, I'm just going to be very quick. The way it worked, right, was that, let me use Western region. So, I've said this thing before, but it's been a while. So let's say, for instance, there's cocoa. Western region would go to the international market and talk to them about, oh, we have cocoa, want to sell it for, let's say, I like the figure I was using then. Let me see if I can remember. I think it was £12. Let's say 12 pounds. So they'll say £12. We're going to sell a bag of cocoa for £12. Sorry, guys. You think we are here to talk about? We are talking real stuff. You think this is not TikTok buzz bros. Go and meet your mates. Or you know what? I was going to meet you permanently, but I'm just going to send you to the naughty corner because you're disturbing. So let me just send you the Nordic corner. Where was I? Let's use Western region. There's cocoa. That's the major source of income. So the government would talk to merchant houses or mercantile houses or international companies and so on and so forth, and say we're going to be selling cocoa to you £12 per bag. As just an example, £12 per bag. Come rain, come shine. Sorry, no. Let's say this. We're going to sell it to you at £20. £20 per bag. The Igbo says no. I can't do more than £15. Then somewhere we meet in the middle. We stop at £18. So now it's £18. No matter what happens, let's use Switzerland for example. Switzerland gets the bag of cocoa from Yoruba land, from Western region for £18. Now, before this, right, the farmers, so there were two groups. There were the farmers and the produce buyers. The third group would be the multinational organization of the mercantile houses. Produce buyers used to buy from the farmers and sell to the mercantile houses. So the farmer sells, let's say the farmer makes a bag of kidney and they usually buy from him for, let's say, £8. £8. The middleman, the produce buyer, will buy it £8 and then sell it to the other guy, maybe at £10 or £12, and that one sells it to Switzerland at, I don't know, whatever pounds. Now, the government comes in and says, all you farmers, this is what we're going to do. Whenever you get your cocoa, just bring it to us. You're going to get £12. Now, remember, they used to pay, let's say they used to pay them £10. The produce buyer used to buy it at £10. We'll sell it to the mercantile houses at maybe 12 or 13 or 14 pounds, and then those ones will now sell it. So now you're telling the farmers, guys, every time you do this, and just bring it to, again, this is a crude example, by the way, just bring it to the government. We're going to buy it from you for £12. What that means basically is that the farmer now doesn't have to think of produce buyer, doesn't have to think of middlemen. He knows he has a ready market, that the federal government, the Western region is buying that stuff from him at a price higher than what he was paying or what was being paid by the produce buyer or the merchant houses. So now it makes sense for him to sell directly to the government. That's the marketing board. They will buy that stuff for £12. But remember, they're going to sell it at £18. The difference is £6. The £6 will now become the income of the Western region. That's how they made money. So they bought from the farmers and they sold. But this example I gave right now, I'm going to repeat it when we're talking about Awolowo and Akintola. Because if the price crashes in the international market, so the price now crashes to £16 or £15, so you're still going to buy it for, even if it crashes to £10, you're still going to pay those cocoa farmers £12. Because that gives confidence to the farmer. He's able to go to the farm knowing fully well that once it's done, he has a ready market. So the good side is that you can make money for the region, for the government. But the downside is that if anything happens in the international market, whatever happens, for instance, let's say, for instance, Ghana decides to increase their production of cocoa and the price crashes, I'm just using that example, by the way, and the price crashes in the international market, and Switzerland says to Western region, Oga, this your cocoa, don't you buy them for 18 again, no, because now supply is more than demand. So this price has to fall. Therefore, we can only pay you £14. The Western region government cannot come to the farmers and say to them something happened in the national market. And that was a fundamental mistake that Akintola made in 61, 62. He increased the prices, and then the international market price crashed. And he got in trouble. And he increased the price against the advice of Awo and the party. But we'll talk about that when we get to Awolowo and Kini. So that's how regions made money. I mean, again, this is a crude form, just quickly explain. There are intricate parts of this thing, obviously, but so that's how they made money. So that story essentially tells us how regions make money. So for the East, it could be palm oil, it could be anything. The difference between what the exporters pay you and what you pay the farmers, that's how you make money. For the Western region, it was that and taxes. That was the only way we made money. And later on, of course, people started invest. The government now started using the money. Those men were wise. They used the money, the revenue. They now invested that revenue in different corporations. So for Yoruba people, it was both the revenue from the cocoa and the taxes, but that revenue, they will now invest it in companies. So for instance, they will build Premier Hotel in Ibadan, Lafia Hotel in Akpata, Ibadan. They will build Lagos Airport Hotel in Ikeja. They will establish industrial estates, right? They will attract foreign organizations to do business so they can pay taxes. They would partner with organizations. They will create Niger Rights. They will create Aska Paints. Western region had Aska Paint, the paint manufacturing company. We had Caxton Press, a press. So, for instance, when we had free education program, the books were published by Western region owned publishing press or publishing house. So it was Western region that was publishing the exercise books that the kids had to use in school. So it makes everything interconnected and symbiotic, right? So different industries, they'll use the money, borrow money to invest. While all these fantastic things were happening in the Western region, what Zeke did was he would take the money. So by the way, the Western region had a bank that was owned by the government. Again, remember that it's a different time, so it's not the same thing as now, where everything is so capitalist and everything. That time was different. They had National Bank, which still exists today, by the way. It's now Wema Bank. So National Bank and Wema Bank were merged to form the new Wema Bank. So money that belonged to the Western Region Marketing Board naturally will go to National Bank, a state-owned bank. For the Eastern Region, it was different. Money that belonged to the Eastern Region went to Zeke's own bank. Okay, be like say they talk about what happened last year, ba? You remember that thing, ba? Remember, I've been 2 years ago. Recently, somebody talk say he collect money from government, put in bank, say he saved the money for the state. It happened before. The idea of saving state money in a bank where you have your own personal interest, it happened with Zeke. And it happened recently too. That's why I said people are just repeating history anyhow. So he now put the money in ACB as though that wasn't bad enough. Zeke had companies. Zeke now took the money from the ACB to fund those companies, which then went bankrupt. Wàhálà bá dé. Èyí owó wọn rí san. Èyí báǹkì wọn ò lówó lọ́wọ́. The bank was bankrupt. The businesses were bankrupt. Zeke could not pay the money back. This was in 1955, by the way. £877,000. Guys, if you see that money this year, it's still big money. Now think about what it was in 1955. This is 2025. That would be 70 years ago. So think about it. If today £877,000 means something, think of what it meant in 1955. It was that incident that then led to what I read earlier in the answered, where Eyoita reported Zeke. And Zeke was still doing, I don't want to go into the details. When they asked him, if you watch the video on YouTube on the Azikiwe and £877,000, you get the details. So they were in this quandary in 55 that led to the Foster Sutton Commission of Inquiry. By the way, the answered House of Lords met in 56. And then the Foster Sutton tribunal held, and they discovered that in the East, the Foster Sutton Tribunal into Zig's African Continental Bank, ACB, found that it was insolvent. The principal use made of the public deposit in the ACB was to finance Zig's various business ventures. In 1955, the Eastern Region Finance Corporation invested large sums of money in the ACB, money which had come from the Eastern Region Marketing Board. In turn, Zig financed his party, the NCNC. In 1955, the ACB and Zig's businesses were virtually bankrupt. In 1959, the Development Bank took over the ACB. The whole reason Azikiwe had been rescued by them, that's by the North, by the British, in 1953, from the political wilderness of the leader of the opposition in the Western region, was to serve as a counterweight to Awolowo. More importantly, he and his NCNC party were needed as alliance partners for the North against the Action Group, which was what I was explaining earlier. With his enterprises in financial distress, his only source of campaign funds having been effectively sealed off with this investigation and with the possibility of jail term for fraud hanging over him. From this point on, Azikiwe and through him the NCNC were firmly back under the control of the strategists in the Colonial office. Funding for the NCNC now came from other sources. Let me play a video of one of the strategists in the Colonial office back in 1955. By the way, this happened in 59. Let me play to you what he had to say on this matter as we wrap up today. Please do take a listen. Listen and be blessed.
The British government wanted the North in alliance with either of the southern region, either with the Yorubas or with the Igbos.
But Awolowo,
without which they cannot
they can't do this
rule the country.
The problem was that Awolowo was a highly principled man.
Okay.
You didn't talk to Awolowo about squalid deals and fixing things. Awolowo was not that kind of person. If you read his books, this man was a world statesman. And his young lieutenant, Chief Enaharo, was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. However, they did do a deal with Zik, Dr. Azikiwe, from the East. Dr. Azikiwe, there was this big problem in Nigeria. It's the same big problem in America and in Britain. How do you get funds to fight elections? The candidates in Nigeria had no money, but they did have marketing boards, which were a kind of semi-nationalized industry. And they borrowed money from the marketing boards. But there was a suspicion that Dr. Azikiwe, who has formed his own bank, the African Continental Bank, was actually bankrupt. But he was borrowing very large sums of money from the marketing boards and not necessarily repaying the loans. We knew this. We had a great secret service. All the politicians' phones were tapped. All the politicians' mail was opened. Everything that any major politician did in Nigeria, we knew in hours. We watched. We knew all that was going on.
Are you saying, in essence, that Dr. Azikiwe took money?
He was blackmailed by the British to do our bidding. We told Dr. Azikiwe that he could go to prison if an inquiry was carried out into his bank and his financial circumstances. However, we would not want to be vindictive if Dr. Azikiwe was cooperative. in helping forward the plans that we had made in the best interests of Nigeria. Dr. Azikiwe has nothing in common with the northern politicians. He loathed the northern politicians. But Dr. Azikiwe went north and did as he was told. And what he was promised was this: the real power, effective power, would be in the hands of the northern emirs. However, it would look great if the president was Dr. Azikiwe and he was given a field marshal's uniform and an admiral's uniform. He asked, please, could he have a row of medals? But they said, well, no, that was a bit difficult, to get the medals. So when the ambassadors started arriving, he was known to be asking people from foreign countries, perhaps they had a medal for his uniform. We thought this was terrible, but it was said that this happened. He was very vain. And for a time, he functioned as first the Governor General, and then when Nigeria became a republic, as the president. But he had no power. And when he did try to tell the army, he said, I'm the field marshal, the army has got to do with this. They said, hey, you're just a ceremonial figure. You have no power.
That last bit he said is something we're probably going to explore. When they said it was ceremonial power, it was what Frederick Possart was writing about in the book Emeka, which led to the first coup in Nigeria that was planned but not executed in 1964. And it was planned by Ojukwu. Anyway, somebody said, who is the person? The person is the person whose voice you just listened to. That was Harold Smith. He was a colonial officer, was a British colonial officer, got to Nigeria in 1955, and then worked with the Nigerian politicians before and even after independence. His name again is Harold Smith.